Okay, let's try to talk about this. This is a case of go directly to mama's couch. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just go straight to mama's couch. The latest news is that there is a new one-time transfer portal window that has opened. And that window runs from July 7th through August 5th. That window is only for a category of athlete that is known as the designated student athlete. Okay? Now, for the most part, designated student athletes are walk-on athletes who have lost their roster slots as collateral damage due to the House settlement, which includes the new roster limits. Now, you may recall that the judge said their collateral damage, you need to figure out a way not to penalize walk-on athletes under this new system. And so the compromise was that the institution could have the right at their discretion to bring back on those athletes who otherwise might have been cut, and those athletes would not count against the roster limit, but only for those athletes that otherwise would have been cut if the roster limits remained firm. And those are called designated student athletes. Now, that is a tag that the institution must give the athlete. Okay, it doesn't just happen upon you. You must be given that designation by the institution. Now, the designation is important because it follows you as long as you are eligible. And you can go from one school to another and you will never count against the roster limits if you have the designated student athlete tag. Okay? Okay. Now, the rosters had to be submitted by July 6th for all institutions. Okay. Once the rosters are submitted, they are fixed. They are locked. Either through the end of the academic year or the end of the athletic season. So, for track and field and baseball, the roster would be fixed through the end of the season because the end of the season is after the end of the academic year. For football and basketball, the roster is fixed through the end of the academic year because all the activities associated with that sport competition has been completed before the end of the academic year. Okay? So rosters are now in. They are fixed. If you are not on a roster, too bad, so sad, you are not getting on one for this year, this coming year. It's over. It's a wrap. Okay? So the question becomes, what is the benefit of this portal window for these designated student athletes? Because the rosters are locked. So if you enter the transfer portal as a designated student athlete right now, where are you going? Because the rosters are locked. So I could find no one that could tell me where these athletes were going. Okay, I kept looking and looking and looking, and so I finally just had to turn to my own mind. Where are these athletes going that are going to enter the transfer portal under this window, the designated student athlete only window? There's only one way that you can get on a roster at this point, because it's after July 6th. The only way you can get on a roster is if the roster is not already maxed out. Okay? So let's take an example. If there are 105 slots, roster slots for football athletes, and for some reason the team has only submitted a roster for 103 athletes, there are 2 roster slots available that can be consumed by this designated student athlete or somebody else, right? Okay. So the only reason that a designated student athlete should really enter the portal this season, right now, this window, is because they have identified a school that has a roster slot available. Because if they just enter the portal, they can only be found and utilized by a school that has a slot. Otherwise, you might as well just stay where you are, because you're not playing at your current school. And if you enter the portal, you're not playing at somebody else's school unless they have a roster slot. Now, the good news for these athletes is if they were on scholarship and did not make the roster, they enter the portal. If they do not have portal success, they can withdraw themselves from the portal and retain the scholarship at their original institution. They're not on the roster, so they're not on the team, but they do get to retain their scholarship if they were on scholarship. Okay, so there is a very narrow use case for any athlete that is a designated student athlete to enter the portal during this one-time cycle. If they know that they have identified a school that has a roster slot available and there's a meeting of the minds. Okay, now that requires some people having conversations. Okay. Now, with this particular scenario, okay, you can enter the portal and then have the conversations. And if it doesn't work out, you can withdraw from the portal. So you don't have to have the schooling to engage in impermissible contact. But keep in mind, this is a very small subset of schools that is not going to have their roster filled out. Okay, there is not going to be a lot of action in this portal. And these student athletes do not need to be hitting it, thinking they're going someplace. Let me remind you what Mama's Couch looks like right now. The football portal for D1 schools over the past portal seasons, okay, in this past school year, 4,239 football athletes entered the portal. 1,647 remain available. That's 39% of athletes who have entered the transfer portal who remain available. That if they don't get picked up between now and August, Mama's Couch. 40% of football athletes in the portal, Mama's Couch. 39% to be precise. Okay. Men's basketball. It's even worse. 1,738 men entered the basketball transfer portal. 892 remain available. That's 51% that right now going home, Mama's Couch. Women's basketball is a whole lot better. 1,492 entered. 369 remain available. 25% remain available. Pretty good, relatively speaking. So let me just remind you again. This portal is not your friend unless you can identify a school that has a roster slot for you. This is truly a case where a designated student athlete can test the portal because they can withdraw without penalty. If they had a scholarship, they will keep it. If they didn't have one, they didn't have one. They can just pull themselves back out. They were paying anyway. Okay. But if there is no roster slot available, entering the portal is not going to help you. So that's it. A lot of people, I'm prayerful that people understand, that student athletes understand, designated student athletes understand that this transfer portal is a risky proposition and has a very narrow use case where it can make sense. That's all I have for now. If you can think of some other reason why somebody who's a designated student athlete should enter this particular one-time transfer portal, let me know, because that's the only use case that I could figure out that made sense. And since nobody else would say anything else about it, hey, I'm the genius right now. The light bulb came off on my head. Anyway, that's it. It's midnight. I'm spicy. Have a good one. Let me know what you think.